Hello, welcome to the F2 show. I'm your host, Fraser Ford, and I'm joined today by Inside F2 editor Hannah Bruffuck, GP Grandstand Jim Kimberley, and Formula One presenter, broadcaster, commentator, and everything else at Formula One, Harry Benjamin. Coming up on the show, we look ahead to Monza as we return to one of the most exciting circuits on the calendar. Who will be the drivers to watch out for this weekend? We'll be discussing all, and we'll be getting the panel to answer all of your questions ahead of round 5. All of that to come then, but Harry, I'm going to come to you first. So great to have you with us, mate. It's the first time we've spoken to you since Silverstone, since when you commentated on Formula 2. How was it?
Scary. I think I got the call up on Friday, so practice and qualifying had already happened, and then through various unfortunate circumstances, I was pulled in from the subs bench and straight into the races on Saturday and Sunday. So very grateful for that, but it was great fun. I think they'd seen me on Inside F2 and then suddenly went, right, you've got to do our F2 comms. So, but it was brilliant. I mean, perhaps not the most enthralling of races around Silverstone. There was a little bit of action. One that sticks to mind is Vasseur and Piastri's battle, which was really fun to watch and commentate on. But yeah, I was very grateful to have come fresh off the back of a couple of Inside F2 appearances and to increase my knowledge of that. But it was good fun.
Yeah, good. And you're brilliant, by the way. Even if we do say so, we might be a little biased, but no, I thought it was good. Jim, we'll come to you next. You've been in the UK for a little while now. Are you getting itchy feet? Are you bored of the UK?
I'm bored because there's been no F2 this entire time, which is nuts to say. How long's it been? It's a bit wrong, isn't it? But yeah, in Manchester at the moment. Been a while since we enjoyed our karting experience, but yeah, just raring to go. The F1 came back and then got rained off, and then finally got a race at Zandvoort, which just happened, which was decent enough, but again, no F2. So really excited for the race coming up to see F2 back in action.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it. And Hannah, obviously an action-packed first half of the season. You ready for even more action in the second half of the season, starting this weekend in Monza?
I can't wait. I feel like as much as I've hated the way it's kind of built up the anticipation for me, I think we're heading to probably one of the most exciting championship battles we've had in maybe a while. I hate to say it, but I think we've got awesome title contenders. And I think we've obviously got Monza coming up, the Temple of Speed. Chaotic qualifying is pending, I reckon. I think we're going to have a very exciting end of the season, and hopefully it goes right down to the wire.
Yeah, absolutely. Cannot wait for this weekend. Let's take a look at the championship standings at the halfway point of the season then. Oscar Piastri leads the way with a 5-point advantage over UNI Virtuosi's Guanyu Zhou. Robert Schwartzman makes it 2 Prema drivers in the top 3 after an impressive last couple of rounds. Dan Ticktum and Yuri Vips round out the top 5. And the team standings, Prema take a 37-point lead into the second half of the season from UNI Virtuosi. Carlin and Hitech have been close all season long. That's going to continue. Carlin take a 2-point lead over Hitech into Monza. And finally, 2018 runners-up ART round out the top 5. The start of the second half of the season, then Monza always produces great racing in Formula 2. What is it specifically about Monza, Hannah, that produces great racing?
I think there's probably a multitude of things, but the most obvious one is it's in its nickname, the Temple of Speed. It's just one of those high speed, incredibly powerful tracks. I think if you're a driver, it's probably one of the best ones you'll ever race on, just because it's so easy to get it so wrong. We've seen it time and time again. Drivers maybe overstating a corner a bit too much. I think overall for the drivers, it's got to be one of the highlights of the calendar this year, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
Yeah, let's hope it is as brilliant as it has been in previous years. And Jim, qualifying, it can be hectic, can't it? I mean, is it going to be the same again this year?
Difficult to say. I think it's going to be more important this year with the new format with the 3 races. So that's going to be really, really key. But yeah, it's a crazy circuit that is as iconic as they come, and it's just all out, go as fast as you can, which in motorsport you think that's how it should be, but it's a real high speed adrenaline rush in qualifying, like you questioned, a big pull needed from the car in front to get you those fast laps. We saw, was it 2 years ago in Formula One, the farcical scenes when everybody was trying to get the toe off each other. And not suggest we're going to get anything like that, but it's going to be a bit mad and vitally important. If you're not going to get into the top positions in qualifying, you can have a really, really bad weekend trying to fight your way through the field. And it's a sort of track, I think you could have some drivers who you might think should be up there in the championship fight, and they could actually find themselves outside of the top 10 and really struggling for the Saturday and Sunday. Hope that's not the case, but yeah, going to be vitally important qualifying position this year more than any.
Yeah, absolutely. And Harry, let's talk about our championship leader, Oscar Piastri. Will he be going into the weekend feeling a little bit more pressure than he has done at any point this season? Because, he's the championship leader now, isn't he?
Absolutely. Not by much, though, as you alluded to right at the start. And he's only just got it, really, through the rounds in Silverstone. So I don't think he'll be feeling too much pressure. I think he'll be feeling the usual amount of pressure that all of these racing drivers put on themselves. And I wouldn't call him the underdog, but he hasn't been the championship leader the whole way through. So perhaps now momentum is swinging towards Piastri. You forget, it's remarkable what he's achieved, in such a short amount of time, doing, Formula 3, becoming champion in his first year, straight into Formula 2 as well. He's used to it. He knows how to handle it. He's used to being fast straight away and used to being at the top. He's got a great team around him, clearly. I know he's sort of mentored and guided through his career by Mark Webber. And he's clearly got the Alpine support as well through the academy, and as does Guanyu Zhou, of course, second in the championship. But at the moment, Piastri looks like he's riding on a high, and I read an interview that he did for the F2 website recently, and just saying, how he's made a few rookie mistakes here and there, but overall, he doesn't feel like he's had any particular weaknesses throughout the year. Consistency has been remarkable for him. He's had 2 non-scores, 2 of them technically retirements. So that's pretty good for a Formula 2 racer in his first season.
Yeah, you speak about that mentality there of, all of a sudden or straight away thinking, I've made a few mistakes. He's the championship leader. Is that the kind of mentality that Formula 1 teams will be looking at, Hannah, thinking, yeah, that's the kind of guy we want on our car?
Completely. I think it shows the mark of not only what a talented driver is, but his maturity. Because ultimately, look at Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion. He can easily identify where something goes wrong. If you're not willing to own up where things go wrong and identify those weaknesses. If you look at, say, Piastri's Formula 3 campaign, his biggest weakness was qualifying. He wasn't the best qualifier on the grid. I don't think he ever qualified on the front row. And then this time around, managed to get pole, has managed to do well in qualifying. It's allowed him to secure those podiums and the victory, and ultimately it's helped his campaign. And I think for him, it shows maybe that although Formula 2's always been kind of the breeding ground and kind of the training ground for young drivers in the ways that they come up through the ranks, it shows that sometimes you can't really just teach a mentality. Some drivers do just have that maturity and that, I hate the phrase, common sense to identify where things go wrong, and it allows him to push himself forward to be a better driver. And I feel like going into Monza, he knows where his weaknesses are. He knows where he can identify them. And when things go wrong, he can push past them and push forward. And that's what you need, especially with a 3-race format. If you have a bad qualifying or a bad first sprint race, you've got to leave it in the dust the moment it happens and just get on with it. And that's probably why he is the championship leader, because he's come leaps and bounds and knows what he needs to do out there.
Yeah, he's had a brilliant first half of the season. And his teammate, Robert Schwartzman, Jim. Seats are starting to fill up now in Formula 1, aren't they? Valtteri Bottas obviously been announced as the new Alfa Romeo driver. I think Alfa are going to take their time by the sounds of it and announcing who Bottas' teammate will be next season, whether that's, former Formula 2 drivers Alex Albon, Nick De Vries, potentially Antonio Giovinazzi staying. Schwartzman needs to pull something special out of the bag to kind of throw his name into contention for that seat, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's going to be really difficult. I don't really think it's a Schwartzman problem, though. I think it's a problem all the drivers are going to have if they're looking to get a promotion. So that includes the championship leaders of Alpine, and the Alpine seat's already full. Schwartzman's got the Ferrari link. So, Alfa and Haas are the likely seats there. Haas full up with half talent and half money. And then Alfa, as we found out at the time of recording, half of those seats has gone a fin for a fin. So it realistically looks like there's only one seat available, and I don't know what any of the drivers, and this is for Schwartzman, one seat available, but I don't know what Schwartzman or any of the drivers could do to get a seat in F1 if this calendar format for Formula 2 is going to continue. They'll need to have a substantial championship lead come the halfway point. So, yeah, it's a frustrating time for Schwartzman. I'm sure it'll be on his mind, because if he were to win the championship this year, what's the point? But maybe he's not alone in that. And I don't say that, I see Harry laughing there. It's, of course, it's a great thing to have on your CV.
Retire now, I say. Honestly, you ain't going any further, mate. You're done.
Well, look at Nick de Vries. He goes into Formula E, and who wants that, right, Hannah?
Honestly.
But it's a serious problem. The lack of seats in Formula One is a major, major issue. And I think after the bumper season of this year, with 3 drivers making the step up, we could have it a complete turnabout and have no drivers step up next year. And that's not any reflection on Piastri, Schwartzman, or Zhou. Piastri's probably in a better position because it's his first year. But yeah, really, really difficult time.
Yeah, that leads on quite nicely to a question we've had from @Fernando14Z. I think a Guanyu Zhou fan as well, with GZ33 in their name. And they ask, realistically, is there any driver on the Formula 2 grid that has a chance of getting a Formula 1 seat in 2022, Harry?
I mean, the one who has the most chance this year is probably Guanyu Zhou, but that is not a very big chance at all, because Alpine have got a serious problem on their hands, and we've probably discussed this already, and you probably have as well on previous shows. They've got so many talented juniors. They ain't got a team to put them in either. They haven't got a junior team. They can't even put them in the main team. They've got a sports car team, as do Ferrari, who are developing, the new hypercar. Rumor has it that they're eyeing up, Giovinazzi to go to there. Is that going to free up a space at Alpha? But Ferrari don't have control over the Alfa Romeo seats anymore, or at least one of them, which is what the Alpha boss has been saying, Fred Vasseur. So does that automatically lessen the chances once again for all the Ferrari Academy drivers in Formula 2? We don't know. And sadly, I think the way that the calendar is orientated this year, it means, as you suggested, you've got to really have a sizable advantage come the halfway point, because the halfway point is when all the deals are being done in Formula 1. And it's too late for the F2 boys to try and secure a deal. And only 20 seats on the grid. Who are you going to get rid of? Money makes the world go round. They all bring money, some more deserving than others. Some have only had a year experience. Some have had 5 years and are still there. Well, Giovinazzi is the only name that springs to mind there. Has he had his time? Probably. But then you look at other past F2 champions. Nick de Vries, is it his time now? He did he went off to Formula E, conquered that. Is it now his chance to do that? Are we now seeing perhaps a trend of, yes, you can win the Formula 2 championship, but then actually go and do something else for a year or two, go and do Formula E, go and do WEC, champion in that, and still, if you've still got ties to F1 come that day, then you may still get a chance. But at the moment, for this season, and it's not the first time we've seen it in Formula 2, I really don't think, and I really hope I'm proved wrong, but I don't think we'll see any Formula 2 races step up. I know Zhou's an outside bet for Williams. Could happen, but he's an outside bet.
It's a shame, isn't it? And, we spoke about this on the mid-season review show. And if you haven't seen that already on our YouTube channel, go and check it out. But the calendar, is that another flaw of the calendar, Hannah? That actually you've only got 4 rounds really before all the Formula 1 seats they all fall into place around Monza, don't they? They've only got 4 rounds to go and prove themselves. Is that another flaw of the calendar?
I would say so. I think especially for any of the drivers that are rookies, normally, say for example, look at Mick Schumacher in his second season. It took a while for his championship campaign to get up and running. And it's the old adage of, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Ultimately, for those drivers, by this point in the season, we're in September? They should be around round 8. Well, of this format of the short season, it should be probably more round 6, possibly say having, Sochi and say Jeddah as the end. They shouldn't be at the halfway point. Last time round it was Silverstone, which was 2 months ago? God, it's that long ago that I can't even remember how long ago it was. It just feels like a lifetime. And for those drivers, I think maybe lost them a slight bit of momentum in the championship, and also maybe lost them in the minds of the people in the paddock. The one thing that probably made the rebrand, say, from GP2 to Formula 2 so great was the thing that the drivers were in the paddock. They were getting in the mix of things. They were in those discussions. You look at, say, for example, Latifi coming through, and people like George Russell, Lando Norris, and Alex Albon. Because Alex was going to go over to Formula E with Nissan and then eventually ended up in Formula 1, because F2 allows you to make those connections, and ultimately being this far in the calendar, being in and out so often, or having such big gaps, it's kind of left them in a bit of an uncharted territory. They're not in that privileged position that, say, they were in last year. F3 and W Series have been there when they haven't. And I think it's ultimately caused that situation as for these drivers, they're not going to get in a looking for an F1 seat if they're not there. They can't put in the performances. And most of the teams know halfway in the championship, it could all flip on its head. As I mentioned, obviously, I think Guanyu Zhou has a chance. For me, I think Yuri Vips is probably one of the best shots again in F1 seat this year, if any of them, because of the possibility of an AlphaTauri seat if things don't go or continue to not go well for Yuki Tsunoda. He's fifth in the championship, 23 points off. His championship could flip overnight and he could be the championship leader by Monza. We don't know. And that's the difficulty.
This is the thing though, Hannah, isn't it? That actually you could have a driver who's fifth in the standings going in, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about this because I know we've got to talk about the format for too much longer. But, if you have a driver who's fifth in the championship going into the last two rounds of the season, which is also the last two rounds of the Formula One season, and they do really well on both of those races and win the Formula 2 championship, they were fifth in the standing. They were, almost out of contention, if you like, in the standings when the Formula One seats were all falling into place, right? And they now have two good rounds and potentially win the championship. Is that it's almost too late in the year to have those races in Formula 2, no?
Yeah, for me, that was, I don't want to say a good thing that came out of the season last year in the COVID situation, but it was a positive in terms of the fact that all the races were condensed together. They were, to a degree, most of the rounds were a lot earlier. We would have known rough by now who the championship contenders were to some degree. Yeah, we can look at the championship right now and make some predictions, but it's the great thing about Formula 2 is it can flip on its head so easily. We could have a driver shoot up the standings very quickly, and it makes it a great championship, but it makes a nightmare for the drivers, because if your best tracks at the back end of the season, you're virtually out of an F1 seat before you've even set foot on the track walk. And it's just unfortunate that silly season gets earlier and earlier every year, and it's just, we know, like, we're finding out about Kim Raikkonen and Valtteri Bottas now and a potential George Russell at Mercedes when this goes out. But those discussions have been going on long before Kimi was discussing his retirement or considering it winter break. These discussions have gone on that long, and just the F2 drivers are out of it. And it's unfortunate that's a consequence of the calendar this time around. And hopefully they'll rectify it going forward.
Jump in on that. So another thing just to think about as well is that all these driver signings that are happening right now, I think they're all fairly multi-year long-term deals. Bottas has signed a deal to take him beyond 2022 and, far beyond that. Look at Schumacher and Haas. Schumacher's not going anywhere fast, is he? Mazepin has got enough money to carry on being there for as long as he probably likes. So this year, Latifi, the same for him as well. He won't be going anywhere. So actually, this year is crucial, because if there's not anyone stepping up this year, which I don't think there will be, is there going to be anyone stepping up next year? All the seats are going to be secured for what? I know this is Formula One and contracts aren't worth the paper they're printed on. But at the same point, you've got to think that are we going to get now a bit of a kind of status quo in Formula One where we're not going to see any kind of big driver transfers for the next few years? And what does that do for everyone going into Formula 2?
It is difficult, isn't it? Because, say Oscar Piastri, for example, wins the Formula 2 championship last year, wins Formula 2 this year, and we've seen how that's benefited Charles Leclerc, George Russell, for example. And then Oscar Piastri might not even have a seat in Formula 1 next season. And, say if Dennis Hauger does the same thing next year, wins Formula 3 this year, wins Formula 2 next year, we might not see him in Formula 1, moving forward as well. So
and suddenly Piastri's old news. Who's he? It's Hauger now.
Exactly. That's the problem, isn't it? So I know this is an age-old question, but is that the problem with, we know there's only 20 seats in Formula 1. Could Formula 2 have like a Formula 2 funded team in Formula 1, or does it not really work like that, Harry?
I mean, I'd be all for it, 100%. I think that's a great idea. But then, it's not obviously it would work probably better if Formula One was, a one spec series where there wasn't all these different budget requirements that require you to do well, because you can have sure, F2 could have their own F1 team, but how that would work logistically, I don't know. I want more teams in Formula One. I want there to be a 24 car grid again. I still know that's only 24 cars, but that's 2 more teams on the grid. That's a hell of a lot more seats suddenly available. Think back to the glory days of Marussia and HRT and Caterham, but I think they may have been, back market teams, but they provided opportunities for GP2 drivers, as it was then, to come into Formula One. And often they'd be paired with a slightly more mature racer, and they would be able to learn from that. Yes, they'd be fighting over, 18th, 19th, but that would still be more beneficial than not racing in Formula One. So I think there is a grounds for something to be done there, but whether I think there'd be too much politics, to be honest, because people would be up in arms saying, well, you can't just have a team that only takes F2 drivers. Then if you win 1 and 2, that people who are part of driver academies are suddenly going to start piping up, and great on paper, absolutely, I'd be all for it. If I was in charge, I'd be there with an F2 team plus 4 other teams. Where I just can't see it happening. I feel like they would have done it by now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's we talk about the calendar, and the calendar maybe not being ideal for drivers like Robert Schwartzman, Oscar Piastri, for example, but it has provided us with 3 races every weekend, which has been brilliant to watch at the first start of the season. So that's good. Let's move it on then. Let's talk about Guanyu Zhou in a little bit more detail. Obviously, 2 years of Formula 2 experience here at Monza. He'll be coming into the weekend, expecting to be able to use that experience and get a good result. No, Jim?
You'd hope so. He's coming off the win at Silverstone, but it's a stop-startless, and I don't know if that's going to be anything particularly positive or negative, because Joe was championship leader, right? So he's been doing so well at the start of the season. And then I know Monaco was a bit higgledy-piggledy for not just him, but a lot of drivers, but still even salvaged things there. He's got to come in with confidence, and the experience is going to be hugely beneficial for him. But yeah, I think we're going to hark back to the calendar, which we're trying to get off of that subject now. But 2 months is a long ass time, it's simple as that. And I do think, as I said, one of my previous answers, that it's a sort of track that even if you're in one of the faster cars, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be qualifying at the front. Which, if qualifies in 8th place or 10th place or something, great, because then you've got this reverse grid. But it's not necessarily going to be the drivers you expect always at the front this time round, just from the nature of the circuit. So Joe's going to come in with as good a chance as anybody, and I don't see that in any negative light. He's in a prime position to take the championship this year, but he has got some big competition in Oscar Piastri. And actually, just briefly on Piastri, and I know we've had the love in for him already, but it did remind me, and Joe somewhat related to it, that I was in a Alpine Driver Academy press conference that they organised just before Silverstone, actually. And Joe wasn't amongst the rest of them. He had previous commitments, but Piastri's confidence was just supreme. For this guy, at the time wasn't even championship, but he's just got a bit of everyone sitting around the table, meeting room. If you're listening on the podcast, this isn't particularly interesting for you, but swanning about a little bit, and you could just sense the calm that he had. So I think Alpine have undoubtedly got the strongest driver academy at the moment, and Joe's biggest threat is going to be Piastri. So as long as he can overcome that, and both Premers, to be fair, he's going to be fine. But it's just going to be fascinating to watch. And I'm not a biggest fan of having 3 races per weekend for other reasons as well. I feel like almost make some of them anonymous when there's a poor race in the 3. But it's going to be 3 races at Monza, which might actually be a bit more barnstorming all the way through the weekend.
I'm looking forward to it. Absolutely buzzing for it. Let's stick with the Alpine guys. Christian Lundgaard maybe hasn't had the season that he was quite hoping for. Double podium last year here at Monza, though. Is that, is this the weekend where he can kind of showcase that ability that we know he has, Harry?
Probably not. He's great. Lundgaard's great, but the car's not working for him this year. Something's wrong with that car.
It never works.
It never works, because Lundgaard should be up there and challenging. Just look at what he did in IndyCar. He qualified 4th. You don't do that if you're a subpar driver. You just don't. So clearly something is not right there, and they clearly don't know what it is either. He's saying if we can just find half a tenth, 10% more in the car, he'd be right up there in the top 6. And he's shown in this car that what's his record so far? So he's got a 2nd place and a 3rd. So he's got 2 podiums so far this season, sitting in 12th. It's not a reflection of who he is as a driver, but unfortunately, the way motorsport works, that has now ruled him out of any kind of Formula One future in the immediate term. But that display in IndyCar absolutely did him no harm at all, and just goes to show how much there is a car disparity, whether and a team disparity as well in these junior ladders. We talk about it a lot in Formula 3. It's also there in Formula 2. We just don't see it as obviously, and this is clearly an example. Alpine would not have him in their academy if he was below par, and he last season, as you just said, double podium in Monza. He's no slouch. I really hope he can turn it around. And if he can have a clean weekend, not make any mistakes from both his side and the team. He's had a fair share of unluckiness. Is that even a word? Unluck. He's had a fair share of unluck. But he has. But, you make your own luck in this game in a way. And it's about how much you can optimize your weekend, not get stuck in a rut, because we've seen time and time again, you have one bad race and that just lead to another one and another one. So you've got to try and fly out of the garage right from the very off. So if he can do that, and with the overtaking opportunities that Hannah alluded to right at the start when looking at the track, this is the place where he can do it. You can go, I think you can go 4 wide on the main straight at one point, whether you want to or not, I don't know. But you can afford to go a little bit hard and fast in Monza, more so than you can at some of the other tracks we visited this year, where you can pick up a bit more damage. So I really hope he can turn it around. Whether he can or not, I don't know. They need to find something in that car, because I don't know what's wrong with it.
It's weird, isn't it? Because it's every single season, and it is odd, isn't it? Talking of luck or unluckiness, if you want to call it that, Harry. Stanley21, Oscar Stanley on Instagram, asked, how far could Christian Lundgaard have gone this season if luck was on his side? If it's luck or if it's the car or whatever it might be, could he be a championship contender?
Woulda, shoulda, coulda, if buts and maybes. This is a sport where numbers count, and you can predict all you like. Yeah, he could have been at the front for sure. And to be fair, he only just missed out on pole by, what was it, in Bahrain, by 0.003 of a second or something like that to Zhou. So he clearly had it at the start of the year, but something's happened. So if he could have basing off of his Bahrain results and speed, then yes, absolutely, he'd be a championship contender. Would that change anything in terms of whether there was a Formula One opportunity, as has been the main talking point of the last half an hour? Probably not. But at the same point, he's clearly shown enough already in his time to warrant opportunities as being a part of Alpine, to warrant those IndyCar opportunities, which we are seeing more and more Formula 2 drivers seeming to get as well. Callum Ilot's doing it in the next weekend or whenever the next IndyCar race is. So, I've forgotten what your question was, if I'm brutally honest. But
unluck. The thing that's unlucky though is that he is partnered in ART with a French talent, and that's the unlucky that's there. Because if one of those seats, the cursed seat, is going to be cursed, it's not going to be Porsche's seat, is it? So that's his big problem. And going to jump in on Harry's point there, or Harry's question, if it was, okay, we're going to shake things up from last season, we're going to put you, if this is Alpine speaking now, I'm Mr. Frenchman Alpine, we're going to put you in Prema, and we're going to put Piastri in ART, they'd be completely different. And it's a spec series, but it's not the same opportunities at all of these teams for various reasons that we all probably know. It's not going to be fair within the sport, within the series, and that's the reason why some teams stay at the top, some teams stay at the bottom. And at this point, if you're going to be in a Prema, better be expecting to have a championship fight, no matter which of the two seats you're in. in ART, one of those drivers might have a championship fight for whatever that reason is. And a French team with a French driver, I don't think it's going to be the guy in the other seat.
I think there was talk as well of, I think Lundgaard said that there was the option to have joined UNI Virtuosi at the start of the season. Would that have changed things dramatically? But this is motorsport. If buts and maybes, make the world go around. At the end of the day, he hasn't performed in that car for reasons perhaps beyond his control. But his teammate has performed more than he has, and Teo Pourchaire, just on that subject, he looks like he's set for a Formula One future, not this year but perhaps the year after, and a long-term one at that. He's very much an Alfa Romeo Sauber long-term prospect, I think. So to go up against someone who's backed like that with a good path into Formula One kind of already scouted out for him, plus being a Frenchman in a French Formula 2 team, Lundgaard's up against it.
Yeah, I think Pourchaire will be expected to win the title next year, won't he? If he is to be in Formula One the following season, we will see. Another driver, obviously, Dan Ticktum, been released from the Williams Academy since the last time we spoke in Silverstone. He's going to be on a mission to prove Williams wrong for the rest of the season, no, Hannah?
Absolutely. I think, although to be honest, the biggest thing is touch and go whether he's even going to finish the season. Obviously, with the Williams discussion, whether his sponsors will continue to fund the campaign if there's no possibility of an F1 seat. And I think that's an unfortunate discussion that we could probably have about multiple drivers on the grid and their funding situations. But for Ticktum, it's going to be the principle that he wants to win that championship, come hell or high water, to say he's won it. And I think especially after he missed out on the European F3 title to Mick Schumacher, he's got a point to prove. And I think the Williams situation is probably indicative of maybe the positives, but also the negatives of these driver academies. And I think for him, I don't know where his future lies, to be honest. I can't see. I hope he completes the season, because I think he puts on some incredible racing and the grid would be amiss without him. But I don't see where his future is. Lundgaard, I reckon, will go over to IndyCar. I reckon Ilott might do the same. Will go and do World Endurance. Dan Ticktum, though, I just don't know where he'll go. And it's unfortunate, but I think for him, there's some strong tracks coming up. He likes a street track, so he'll be gunning for Jeddah, I reckon. He's done well, obviously, in improved street tracks across this season and last season, so hopefully he can do well there. But it is just that difficulty for him is, where does he go and what does the future lie beyond Formula 2?
I reckon we stick him in the comms box with Harry. He does not hold back, does he? I think that'd be hilarious.
Get him on the
Up for that, Harry?
Well, it's if they let me back in the comms box again. Who knows? But I think he wouldn't hold back. Dan Ticktum, he's had his fair share of off-track excursions as well, which perhaps haven't painted him in the best of lights. But he's got a personality, hasn't he? And perhaps I don't know the full story around how the Williams partnership ended. Whether he just didn't, if there was no chance of an F1 seat, then he didn't want to be with them anymore. But I imagine it was probably more, they weren't going to carry on supporting him, if you give up support halfway through a season. But it's a shame, for the British fans as well, that, a young British racer coming through, seemingly halted in his tracks. But you can't say he hasn't given it a good whack. I hope he can find a place maybe in sports cars or maybe even touring cars. You never know. But I think he was very much wanting a Formula One drive. And I wonder how much that will affect his mentality going forward for the rest of the season if he is able to participate in all the rounds. Whether that knocks you for six a little bit, because what's your aim at the end of the day? And if he's lost the backing, if how much further can you look outside of Formula One? So that'll be an interesting one to watch, I think, and telling of how strong a driver he is actually.
Yeah, it would be a shame if you couldn't finish the season. And I think it would be a shame for Formula 2 for a driver that's in the top 5 of the championship right now to not finish the season. But let's wait and see. Some more driver updates for you then. So Enzo Fittipaldi jumps into the Charouche seat, obviously replacing David Beckman for the second half of the season. 20 years old, 2018 Italian Formula 4 champion, fresh off the back of his maiden Formula 3 podium in Budapest not so long ago. Jim, how do you think he'll fare?
I was surprised, and I'm pretty devastated for Beckman, in all honesty. I don't think he's going to be out his depth. That's not the right word, because I think there are worse drivers in Formula 2 than he is. I have watched Formula 3 all season, and his podium's fine, but he's in the same car as Logan Sargent, who all honesty, should be the one getting the promotion to Formula 2 this year. And I think even Fittipaldi would admit to that. And based off of the performances this year, it should be Logan Sargent now getting the promotion. It's not necessarily that Fittipaldi's been completely outshone, but he isn't the lead driver in the Formula 3 team, and 3 of them. In fact, they've just shed Richard Degeroux as well. So Giroux going through some sort of restructuring there. But yeah, he's gonna be fine. I suspect, speaking about Ticktum and finances and the surname, that isn't going to be an issue for him, finding sponsorship or family wealth or anything like that. So you could argue it's not particularly important whether he does well this year because he's going in with a partial season. So he's going to be fine. Will I expect to see him on the podium this year? No, I don't think he's expecting that really. Could nab some points. He could have a bit of fun in a reverse grid race. I think that's probably where we'll see him getting a bit more screen time in a reverse grid race. But he's a fine driver. But speaking of the drivers we think are going to make it into Formula One at some point, I don't think he's going to be one of them, sadly. But most of the drivers aren't. And just like Harry was saying with Ticktum, you hope he finds a seat somewhere. And Ticktum, out of all of the Formula 2 non-graduates, is probably going to be one of the more memorable ones. And that's not coming off the back of a famous surname, easy for me to say, unlike Fittipaldi is going to be doing. And yeah, it is what it is. I would have liked to have seen Sargent take the seat. And I would have even more liked to see Beckman continue, especially after the decent showing he's had so far. But I've got nothing against Fittipaldi, but yeah, Beckman did not deserve to be dropped.
Yeah, quick word on Beckman. I think he's, I'm sure we'll look back at him and be very happy with the first half of the season, right?
I'd say so. I think he can only be proud of what he's done. If you compare him to his teammate Samaya, he's not just knocked him out of the way, he's knocked him out of the park. Obviously, 2 podiums, 13th in the championship, in a Giroux's car that, to be honest, has struggled for most of the season. I think you can't understate how well he's done, and it just harks on me the fact that he's not going to be able to continue his campaign. I agree with Jim. To be honest, Logan Sargent should have been the one that got the promotion, and it just proves time and time again that sometimes money is the thing that speaks most in motorsport. However much we don't like it, is Beckman should be allowed to continue his season, but unfortunately he's not going to, and I hope he's able to get a drive elsewhere because he thoroughly deserves it.
Well, speaking of a drive elsewhere, I mean, there's a vacancy at HWA. The seat hasn't been announced yet. We don't know who it's going to be. Keep an eye out on all of our Inside F2 socials to see who that's going to be. At Ari TH Feeder asked on Twitter, obviously with Aitken unavailable and seemingly having said goodbye to Formula 2 as well, who's going to be in the car this weekend? Will they go with someone with maybe a little bit more experience, Harry, or are they going to go for someone that is fresh from Formula 3?
I don't know. Is the answer, if I'm brutally honest. It will all depend on how much cash they need right now, isn't it? But with Aitken gone, I'm just looking at some of the possible contenders that I wrote down earlier on. Who's going to be alongside Alessio Deleda? They need somebody who can score them points, who can finish races up there. Yeah, I think we've all made the case already for Logan Sargent. He was the highest returning driver this season in Formula 3, and I think is more than capable of racing it out in Formula 2, and he would be top of my list. Who was another name that came to mind? Jake Hughes could be an outside bet, actually. I was looking at the previous drivers from the last couple of years. He could definitely do a decent job. Whether he'd want to or not, I don't know, because I feel like there's a certain, well, I'm making this up, of course, but maybe there's a certain, part of the ego after you've left Formula, junior Formula behind, does he want to go back there? But Jack Aitken's done it as well. It's a ride in Formula 2, a top competitive racing series in front of Formula 1. You wouldn't sniff at it, would you? So I'd put Jake Hughes, Logan Sargent, and maybe Nannini, because he's still got the connections there, depending on how that whole Campos situation lies at the moment contractually.
Yeah, shout out to Nannini, by the way. I mean, he's done F2 Silverstone, Budapest, Spa, Zandvoort in Formula 3, and now he's back to do Formula 2. I mean, that's a full-on. He's like a Formula 1 driver, that is. That's the Formula 1 calendar, isn't it? But yeah, Jake Hughes is definitely a good shout. Obviously, we had him on the show further or earlier on in the season, and he spoke a little bit about, obviously, his good relationship with HWA. So that maybe that will be, a good outside bet, Harry. We will see. Jim, I think, Jake Hughes would do a job at HWA.
I'm sure he'd do the job. Absolutely. Came back for some Formula 3 fun. So, yeah, why not? I think doing the job at HWA is not putting it in the wall, with all due respect to HWA at the moment. I don't think they're expecting a win, are they? So there's a bit of, do you want to come back and trundle around in the midfield to the back markers? And that could be the sort of stuff that decides it. But Nannini, speaking of that, I'd love, again, speaking before the show, I'd love if he was to be the one that does both Formula 2 and Formula 3 with 6 races in one weekend at Russia, because that could be a big determining factor. Wow. Could you imagine how exhausted that kid would be? But yeah, that could be a real factor, because do they want to keep chopping and changing their drivers? Maybe they do, I don't know. But if they don't, then you don't want to go and get a Formula 3 driver, because what the hell are you going to do come Sochi when Formula 3 and Formula 2 are going to be racing together? So big decision.
We talk about, spoke about earlier on about how these Formula 2 drivers might not have had the airtime that they necessarily needed to get a Formula 1 seat. Matteo Nannini does definitely not fall into that category, does he? He's had all of the driving that he needs in front of the Formula 1 paddock. But yeah, guys, that's all we have time for today. So Jim, Hannah, Harry, thank you very much for joining us on today's show. We'll, of course, be back for the Round 5 review show, so keep an eye out for that early next week. In the meantime, if you enjoyed the video, please make sure you give it a like, subscribe to the channel for loads more videos and content. But from me, Fraser Ford, and all of us here at Inside F2, we'll see you next time.